I'll start recording right away. So ladies and gents, as you know, this is the first Revitalized Zen weekend retreat. And lovely that we have a little group together. Of course, I remember when I started teaching tantric teachings, when I founded Amrita Mandala in 2008, which is a while ago. There were groups were very small for the first many years until for the first 8-9 years I was teaching in Finnish, in my native language. And I had first foreign students, I think in 2012 or 13. One of them was from Australia and the other one was from Canada, I think. But the beginnings of Amrita Mandala were like the beginnings of any method, any mission. We started very small, and Amrita Mandala is still relatively small. It's not that big of a Sangha, just 70 members roughly. But it remains to be seen what will happen with these revitalized Zen teachings during the next 2 years. And I've said it a couple of times already, but I've decided to give Revitalized Zen 2 years, and after that I will decide whether there is like a, if I see like a proper interest, dedicated students, practitioners, then of course I will continue. But at this moment we don't know yet, so remains to be seen. Nevertheless, for the past couple of months, when I have presented my view of Zen based on my Zen training back in the day, as well as, of course, I've been a tantric practitioner since 2006, so soon 19 years, soon 20 years, and that cannot but affect my view about everything, including Zen. And a lot of, what I saw and experienced in Zen, or what I didn't experience in my Zen training, I have contemplated a lot through my experiences, both as a practitioner and as a teacher of Tantric Buddhism, Tantric Dharma. And now, after many years of teaching Tantra and Great Perfection teachings, Dzogchen teachings, it's quite unique, quite different presentation of Zen Buddhism than I'm aware of, that is out there. Well, if we look at some classical Zen texts, for example the Platform Sutra of the Sixth Patriarch, which is a very commonly studied text, or Zen Master Dogen's writings, for example, those two, there is some details in those writings, but maybe you could say that there is not enough details so that these texts and their meaning in relation to practice and experiences can be interpreted in different ways, can be interpreted. And of course, we all interpret meanings of different key terms, meanings of such classical scriptures. But having said that, Buddha Dharma has very clear standards for what the Dharma is and what it is not. Buddha Shakyamuni, who is considered the founder of Buddhism in our era, in our time, he had very, very clear definition of what the Dharma is about, and specifically what suffering is about and what is the way out of suffering. And this is a really key point. What is the way out of suffering? To understand the way out of suffering, we need to understand how suffering is, what suffering is, and how this suffering or dukkha, this existential pain, how it relates to us, right? And I would additionally say about suffering that I think that in this time of ours, we live in the modern West, and the world has changed so much during the past 100 years. People's lives on daily basis has changed so much just during the last decade, because suddenly we have smartphones. Almost everybody has smartphones that in the history of human species for the last couple of 100,000 years, nothing like it existed before. So human experience has changed immensely within the last 100 years, within the last decades, within the last decade. And this related to suffering, this contributes a lot how suffering is like and how it wasn't before. And here I'm specifically referring to traumatization, psychological traumatization, or what we now know as traumatization, which that I don't think existed and was understood the same way in ancient traditions of Dharma and lineages of Dharma and masters of Dharma. So I think that what I have done in Amrita Mandala the past few years also is necessary in Zen Buddhism and in Revitalized Zen to understand Dharma properly and to heal, understand trauma properly and to heal trauma. And then of course, way out of suffering from the condition of suffering where different habits and patterns based on self-delusion, it's a wheel that repeats itself. And it's called samsara, repeating the wheel of suffering because of delusion. And this is basic Buddhist term. And another basic Buddhist term is way out from that suffering is called a way to nirvana. Nirvana literally means blown out or extinguished. Something like a fire that is extinguished, no longer burns. So this is a central idea in all types of Buddhisms, all types of Buddha Dharma, which there are many. But Buddha Dharma basically includes three different vehicles. First one is Hinayana, or small vehicle. Second one is Mahayana. And the third one is Tantrayana, or Vajrayana. And when we speak of clear standards in Buddha Dharma, clear meaning what Buddha Dharma is about, what this doctrine of enlightenment doctrine of the Buddha is about, all these three vehicles teach the same two things, really, or they should be teaching basically two different things. And even though Hinayana and Mahayana are very different in terms of scope and depth, nevertheless the same two principles are in Hinayana also. And the first one of those two principles that the Buddha taught is anatta or shunyata, which means selflessness or emptiness. So anatta or selflessness is term specific to Hinayana. When we speak of Mahayana, we don't, even though the realization of selflessness and emptiness it's like a small sister and bigger sister. So they are, close relatives. We understand that the first one is smaller and the other one is a bit bigger, maybe a head taller. So that's exactly how it is with Hinayana and Mahayana, that the scope of selflessness realization or emptiness realization goes farther in Mahayana than in Hinayana. Nevertheless, that same principle is there. But just to be clear, that's why it's called anatman or no self in Hinayana, and then emptiness, shunyata, in Mahayana. But it's the same principle. In Mahayana it's just extended. And how it is extended, why in Mahayana we are able to get a completely comprehensive realization of emptiness. What does emptiness mean in the first place? Let's think about that. So the reason why I often, when I teach, I use the term selflessness and emptiness interchangeably as synonyms, because selflessness it describes the experience much better than emptiness does. But so what does it mean? Selflessness, selfless. Let's do a little experiment. Just sit there like you're sitting. Don't do nothing special. And don't expect anything special. And now listen to a sound. Any sound that you are hearing from the vicinity. Or if it's the sound, if there's no sounds at all, just silence. Listen to that. Then choose another sound and listen to that for a moment. The ear does its job spontaneously. We don't need to grab that sound. We don't need to go fetch the sound to hear it. Sounds simply arrive in our ears and they are heard. No effort is needed. no effort is needed, and no hearer is needed. It's not needed. This hearer would be who would be responsible of doing the hearing. Sounds are simply heard. There is hearing of the sound, but no hearer. There is listening, but no listener. Same if you start looking at any object in the room. Just looking. You don't have to stare. You can just naturally gaze at flower, any object you might have. Then look at something else. And again, in this action, isn't it that it's simply there is seeing of an object without a seer, without a me, without a self who is responsible, who is performing or doing the seeing. No sense of me or I or self is needed, because eyes automatically see. Seeing automatically happens. So a concept, if we think that, okay, I'm looking at this chair in front of me and it's me doing the looking. It's me, it's definitely the seer who is looking. No, it is simply, seeing happens, watching happens, looking happens. But no looker, no watcher, no seer. Same thing with all sensory experiences. When you're sipping tea, eating food, when you are touching, massaging your own arm, touching, giving a massage to your spouse, when you are smelling your morning coffee, smelling food, giving a kiss to your child or grandchild. So this is selfless hearing, selfless seeing, selfless tasting, selfless I-less, me-less touching. Anything, everything selfless. So this sense of self, it's just extra. It's something added, something unnecessarily added. It's kind of like nowadays you have these really weird ice cream flavors or coffee flavors. Like you might get licorice raspberry ice cream, and I'm not having it, but you might, it's available in markets, something like licorice raspberry vanilla, and there's too much going on there. That's what I'm trying to say. There's too much. unnecessary elements. So this self-based, I use this term self-based experience, where we are confused about our who or what we are. Self-based, when we have an experience that this is just a little simple experience what we did when we were listening, seeing, touching, tasting, just a very simple experience, but experiment. But then when we have a conversation with somebody, or when we are in traffic lights, and for 5 seconds it lasts too long when the red light is on. Something similar. There are so many events and situations throughout our daily life, but in any such situation, because we like something and we dislike something else, we want more of what we like and we want less of what we dislike. This constant picking and choosing creates this self-delusion. Self-delusion. So when the red light is 5 seconds too long in traffic lights, you get irritated or even angry. And then suddenly instead of energy flowing more naturally, it just limits your mind, limits your whole flow of energies, and gives you a very unpleasant, unnatural experience. And this experience I call self-based experience. When we have a reaction based on this delusion, false notion that there is this self, me or I, this self-entity in me, it immediately distorts energies, skews energies. It's like a steel band around the head. I'm sure you know what I mean by this. Blood pressure, pulse goes higher, you might start sweating when you get irritated, agitated, angry, anxious, fearful. So many physical symptoms as well follow. But so this self-delusion that leads to these countless many reactions throughout the day in people's lives, this is the suffering, the dukkha, that Buddha Shakyamuni was talking about. He had been meditating. He was a very privileged child and young man because he was a prince, son of a king and queen, who lived a very easy and privileged life in the temple for many years. And then he learned about the sick, about the old, and about the fact that all beings die. So he found out about sickness, old age, and death, and this drew him to pursue the spiritual path. Actually, what he saw was a sick person, an old person, and a dead person, and then he saw a meditating yogi. So he figured that, oh, I will also get old, sick, I will one day die, and this gave him a hunger for something else, the kind of hunger, existential hunger, that hadn't been how do you say, nullified in his life in the king's palace. with all the pleasures, really good foods and desserts and sex with the maidens more than you can ever dream of, and just hanging out with the lads, probably smoking different kinds of herbs and just doing that his whole life. Everybody being nice to him and serving him, he could order anything, but nevertheless, sickness, old age, and death got to him. And then he left the palace, became a yogi, and spent, it varies how many years he's told to have meditated, but 6, 7, 8 years he meditated and practiced, taught by these some known teachers of the time. And then after those years he felt that I have been meditating here for many years, living like an ascetic, and I haven't really found anything. I haven't really found a solution. He had this intuition, just like I did back in the day, that despite of such a total commitment to practices, he hadn't found a solution to his problem, to this existential anguish based on self-delusion. So that moment he decided to eat. He was very, very thin, hadn't slept in a long time, just sitting in meditation, not eating in an ascetic manner. And then he ate a little bit, felt a bit better, and sat in meditation. In Zen tradition they say that he sat for 7 days and 7 nights. And then on the 8th morning, early in the morning, in the night, he saw a very bright star in the sky, and then he had his first awakening experience. First Kensho. Kensho is the term in Zen. So for the first time, then he was able to, everything dropped. His self-delusion, this compulsive belief in the self-entity, me, I, it completely vanished when he saw the bright star in the sky. And then everything changed. This is, of course, it's the common legend of Buddha Shakyamuni, and there are no real details of like historical record where it would have been explained like it's the legend is told, the story is told in a very simple manner, like suddenly he had this big awakening and then he became a Buddha. Practically it doesn't happen like that to us people, and I'm 100% certain that it didn't happen like that to Buddha Shakyamuni either. But it's a simplified story from 2,500 years ago. The point, however, is that when we live our daily lives and we have this, this sense of self-entity, believing, conceptualizing ourselves as this entity, this separate, there's an entity called me or I here, and then everybody else is an entity like that. This is a complete artificial structure that we have created ourselves. Of course, the surrounding culture, including our family units, have greatly contributed to that, because this is the culture that we have, samsaric culture. So, everything around us helps to build this delusion of self, and it's sometimes called that said that this self creates separation, creates distance. But again, if we come back to that simple experiment that we did, listening or hearing, seeing, tasting, touching, without this seer, hearer, in that experience, there is no sense of distance, no sense of separation. And this experience is selfless. There is no performer or an entity responsible of this hearing, sensing, seeing activity, or who it would belong to. Okay? So back to Buddha Shakyamuni and what Buddha Dharma, according to him, teaches. So this selflessness or emptiness is really the heart and soul of Buddha Dharma, including Zen Buddhism, including various forms of Hinayana Buddhism, including all forms of Tantrayana or Vajrayana. It is really the heart and soul of definitive doctrine of Buddha Dharma. But there is more. There is more to this. Oh, maybe I will just say that when it comes to emptiness and the comprehensive view about emptiness, it simply means, in simple terms, that there is a gross sense of self in us, in our minds, gross sense of self, and then there are subtler, how do you say, a subtler sense of self, and then there are very subtle sense of self. But the same sense of self, it simply has it takes different forms, different shapes. And to release this sense of self, this self-entityness, is what the first two stages of Zen Buddhism called Kensho and Satori are for. This is universally the case, Zen Buddhism as a tradition is known for emphasis on Kensho and Satori, awakening, deep awakening. And all awakening, actually, whether we are talking about Zen Buddhism or any other type of Buddhism, even outside Buddhism, is about seeing through those bits of self-delusion. When you are sitting there behind at the wheel of your car and the red light is on and you get frustrated, irritated, it creates this like a tightening experience in your energetics, in your mind, and you start feeling anxious, little restless. If at that moment you see through this sense of self, you see through this delusion, then awakening can happen. But if we just keep reacting accordingly, going from one situation to another, where we are pestered by this sense of self, again, chasing the likes, avoiding dislikes, it just keeps accumulating. And this is, of course, what we see in people. This is how people live, isn't it? But it's not, one cannot be satisfied or happy that way. It is impossible to be happy or satisfied. Like Buddha Shakyamuni's example as a billionaire prince, so well demonstrated. We see so many famous people millionaires, billionaires, Hollywood actors who have everything they could possibly ask for in terms of things and materia, but then they OD and kill themselves, suicides, some end up in jail even. Oh, so there you have it. That's samsara in a nutshell. So emptiness is a very big deal in Buddhism. Like you probably can't find a single book by a Buddhist author that wasn't speaking about emptiness. And it's definitely, I can speak from my own experience that from the when I first heard about awakening and Buddhahood as like an Buddhahood, not as something like I can be fan of, but Buddhahood as something that would remove my suffering, my confusion, delusion. When I first heard about this, I immediately felt that, oh, that's what I've been looking for 23 years by then, all my life. And then, ironically, what happened to me, like similar to what happened to Buddha, is that I started my formal practice. I had been meditating spontaneously when I was a little boy, and then learning a little bit of meditation from my judo teacher throughout my childhood and youth years. And then during high school years, I would go to here and there to try meditation in different meditation groups. This is like 90s in Finland. So very little was available back then, but nevertheless, getting a little taste, going to one meditation group or two every year or something like this for many years, until came the day that it really clicked. I went to a Zen introduction course in Helsinki, in the local Zen center, and the moment I grabbed the door handle, there was an energy current running through me that moment, and I knew that, oh, now I finally found what I've been looking for so many years. So I started practicing from that day onwards. I started sitting 8 hours or more every day, literally from that day. And I did it for 8 years and 10 months. And for the first 4 years of those 8 years and 10 months, I was practicing Zen with first with a couple of Zen teachers who are located there in Scandinavia, and then I moved to Japan for a year, where I was really fortunate to study and make connection with Terayama Roshi, who was my heart teacher, who later asked me to teach. And then I also stayed in Sogenji Monastery with Shodo Harada Roshi, and then also met Tangen Harada Roshi briefly, who left a lasting impression, and so on. But after 4 years of traditional Zen practice, and when I say, again, just to remind, just to clarify, I practiced day and night. No rest days. Day and night, following the instructions that I received to the letter. Not a moment of laziness, not a moment of fighting against. I really gave it my all. But after those 4 years in traditional Zen, which we associate as this tradition of enlightenment or awakening, I didn't have a single experience of awakening. I didn't have a single kensho. And so came the day in the summer of 2006 when I actually had this overheating of my nervous system, kind of a bit similar like Zen Master Hakuin's Zen sickness that he had at 24 years old. So I had this overheating experience where for 2-3 days non-stop I was sweating profusely. And I realized that this isn't working for me. And I had to admit, which was extremely hard to admit. You know, I was completely in love with Zen. I wanted to spend the next 20 years at least in Japan studying traditional Zen and, you know, become like a perfect Zen student with, or a monk with robes and a shaved head and, you know, calligraphies and tatami mats and bows and bells and all this paraphernalia. I was completely in love with that. So it was very painful to admit that this doesn't work. This doesn't work. So ironically, the training system that kind of has a reputation as a tradition of awakening didn't awaken, didn't do anything to me really. Very little benefit. And of course it was very painful at the time, but now in retrospect I consider this experience of total disillusionment one of the most precious experiences in my life. Total disillusionment. Total disillusionment about the so-called preciousness of, how do you say, time-tested traditions. I would love if Zen traditions, all the different lineages that exist and all different lineages of Hinayana and Tantrayana, if they were all legit in the sense that their teachings would really get to the heart of the matter of awakening and enlightenment. But it simply is not the case. People are not awakening. People are not going through the Kensho stage of having 13 major awakenings, followed by 13 awakening maturations, thus finishing Kensho and Satori stage completely, thus reaching a stage where emptiness has entirely, emptiness of all phenomena has been realized. This is extremely, extremely rare in the world of Dharma. Doesn't really exist in Zen Buddhism in East or West at all. It doesn't happen. And hence, of course, revitalization of Zen, and also for the same reason why Amrita Mandala exists. Because the same problem and other problems exist in the world of Tantra as well. But my point is that this emptiness, realization of selflessness in all shapes and forms is very important. Why? What replaces this deluded, confused, existentially lost state of mind? Seeing clearly, hearing clearly, touching, feeling, tasting, smelling clearly, thinking clearly, going through memories clearly, without getting entangled, without getting confused about who or what I am, without creating this separation of self and other. In other words, always connected. It is this self and other, this split, this dualistic split that creates distance. Distance which makes us feel awkward and uncomfortable. But when the self is gone from here, no distance. Intimate, natural. Natural means like nature. How is nature? Just flowing. Energy is flowing, settled, yet radiant with life force, radiant with vitality. So this is even though emptiness as a term sounds very dull and boring, the Sanskrit term shunyata, shunya means zero, nil. So it actually means, realizing shunyata means that you return back to zero. But zero, in a sense, is meaningless. It doesn't have a charge one way or the other. But at the same time, zero is full of potential. Full of potential. Okay, so I'm speaking about the standards that Buddha Shakyamuni set. There's another principle. So emptiness is, the first thing that students of Buddhism, practitioners of Buddhism should realize. I have 22 students who have realized the full scope of emptiness. So it is doable for everybody. If I give a little bit of statistical data, out of those 22, like it roughly has taken so far something like 5-6 years on average of practice. But then there are also some individuals there who have finished in, I think Kripa finished in 2 years and 2 months. I might remember wrongly, but there is somebody who finished in 2 years and 2 months. And there's another one, a gentleman from Canada called James, who finished in something like a year and few months, something like this. So it can be, it doesn't, one thing that I want to convey is that this persistent idea that, and sometimes Zen people, they take pride with this. They kind of think that, oh, you have been only practicing 10 years, so you're kind of a beginner still. And then if you have been practicing 20 or 30 years, then they kind of start feeling little pride, good about themselves. Okay, but how about, have you realized emptiness? What have you been doing for 30 years? Sometimes, what have you been doing for 50 years if you only have had 2 or 3 awakening experiences? Are you a Buddha yet? Seriously, what have you been doing, people? Of course, this is a question that people get enraged. People get really upset when asking this question. But, what's new? Religious people do that. People who are invested in it for the wrong reasons always have that reaction. Always have. Religious people. But that's what emptiness what it does. It removes this confusion that is built on this sense of self. And then when it's gone, you simply have a clear mind, day and night, at all times. No confusion in that sense anymore. So Shakyamuni Buddha, he taught this selflessness and emptiness. Of him it is, he taught the Dharma, or turned the wheel of Dharma 3 times. The first time he taught the selflessness. Second time he taught emptiness. But there is a third time. So after emptiness is and has been fully realized, there is a third turning of the wheel of Dharma. And that's when he taught the so-called Buddha nature, Tathagata Garbha teachings, Buddha nature teachings. So when emptiness is, self-delusion is completely out of the system, what then? Are you a fully realized Buddha yet? No. You have only realized, you have only sorted out kind of half of your problems, half of issues, half of distortions. So after that, there are the Buddha nature teachings that will first you have clarity as your foundation because of that emptiness. That emptiness makes you sober and clear, gives you sobriety, wakefulness. And after that, this Buddha nature teaching is about aliveness. Aliveness, softness, stability. So there's this whole process of familiarizing with this aliveness aspect of Buddha nature, of wakeful nature. And in my terminology that I've used, I'm just copy it from Amrita Mandala because it's so handy. But we have 3 bodies, one physical, and then we have 2 subtle bodies. Emptiness or wisdom, prajna, is realized in the so-called causal body that we have. These causal body channels run inside the body, but also outside the body, creating the energy field. So that's the terrain where selflessness, emptiness is realized. But then there's the second subtle body that I call astral body, made of thicker, grosser energy channels, still non-physical, that run inside the physical body in the same space as physical organs, but have non-physical form. And this Buddha nature, this third turning of the wheel of Dharma, is about returning the meridian system or the astral body back to its pristine condition. And that's how Buddha nature or Buddhahood is realized. So when we speak of the 4 stages of Zen practice, Kensho, Satori, Daigo or Daigo Tette, and Nyorai or Buddhahood, with the first 2 we are talking about opening and activating the causal body, the subtler of the 2 subtle bodies. Kensho and Satori stages. Or if we use Bhumi terminology, Bhumi openings and Bhumi perfections. Kensho and Satori. And then Daigo or Daigo Tette, it literally means great death. Daigo, great death. We open and activate and purify, return the meridian system into its pristine condition. And when you have both of those subtle bodies returned to natural pristine condition, then you are a Buddha. Fully, completely enlightened Buddha, just like Buddha Shakyamuni, and many, many, many men and women who have come after him. And that's actually a very important point, that sometimes people are confused about this, that Buddha Shakyamuni is the only fully enlightened being in Buddhism. No, that's a complete misunderstanding. The whole point of Buddha Dharma is to help people understand that we all have Buddha nature, we all have Buddha mind, and that this delusion and all these habits and patterns we have stored in our system, they are optional. But Buddha nature is not optional. So we have the option of removing all these habits and patterns and delusions, and then, for the figure of speech, landing on this Buddha nature, revealing the Buddha nature that we already have had. So it's a very important point of Buddha Dharma that it's not really for worshippers, for followers, it's for practitioners. Those who want to awaken, those who want to reveal the Buddha that we all have inside. So those are the two main doctrines, two main teachings of all Buddha Dharma: emptiness and Buddha nature, or emptiness and aliveness. Emptiness and aliveness. Very clear, and needs to be also conceptually understood. I think that one great problem that Zen Buddhism has suffered for a long time is this misunderstanding. The first Zen patriarch, Bodhidharma was a South Indian prince. He was also a prince. Whose teacher Pragyatara told him to take the teachings to China. And Bodhidharma is said to have founded the Shaolin monastery. He didn't actually found the Shaolin monastery. It already existed 20-30 years before he got there. But there is this quote from Bodhidharma that, how does it go? Something, it's like, it's a negation of, the quote goes something like, beyond words and letters, transmitting direct experience, beyond words and letters. And this has been completely misunderstood and kind of purposefully used in a way that allows samsara to keep rolling. So it's been completely misunderstood and misinterpreted purposefully. What was I saying? Completely lost the track of my thought. Yes, so what Zen for a long time I think has suffered of is this kind of not understanding how important it is to explain things in a clear manner. Explain things in a clear manner. I remember one acquaintance who practiced 30 years under a Rinzai Zen teacher, actually in America, a Japanese teacher, but this man, he was a student of this Japanese Zen master for 30 years and became his Dharma heir. And after 30 years, this man who had then become a Zen teacher, he started practicing Chokchen, Tibetan Chokchen. Tibetan Chokchen is like a tantric take of the same teaching, like in Zen. But it's a tantric version, which means that there is much more emphasis on empowerments, formal transmissions. But this man, this Zen teacher, after a couple of years of studying Chokchen, said that when Zen people say weird things, Chokchen actually explains things. And we can understand that if this, should we say, typical Zen pedagogics was used in, when kids go to school, if mathematics was taught by Zen masters, or biology, geography, anything, those poor kids wouldn't learn anything. And it simply is the case that with all love and respect, with utter compassion, I say this has done a major disservice to Zen practitioners for so many generations, because it leaves so much space for misunderstandings, false interpretations, thus keeping samsara alive. So the basics need to be understood really well theoretically. The view of practice needs to be understood really well for any method to work. For any method to work. Of course, we are talking about, if we take some example. For example, in Revitalized Zen, we do this shouting practice, dynamic concentration. And I can very easily explain the instructions in 5 minutes. And then just tell you, okay, now you have the instructions, go and practice, come back in 2 years, and let's see what you have understood. This is exactly how it is in Zen. Giving instructions in 5 minutes, and then even if you live in a monastery and meet a Zen master or a Zen teacher one-on-one, you might not really get more instructions. But there is so much room for misunderstanding, for false interpretations. And that's why pedagogics is so important. This is also a big problem in Tantrayana. Things need to be explained properly. Just like many Vajrayana masters have explained in detail, in utter detail. But then the question is that if the teacher doesn't personally have complete insight of emptiness, or maybe has, like I said, if a teacher, even after many decades of practice, lacks sufficient insight, might have had 4 kenshos, 4 awakenings, 4 bhumis open, might have had 7 openings. That's still far from finishing even the first stage, kensho stage. But this is the reality of Zen today, and like it has been in history for hundreds of years. So how can you really transmit and convey, teach emptiness to others if your own experience is so much lacking? You can't. You can't. That's simply how it is with everything, isn't it? With everything. If you don't understand, if you don't have personal experience of something, you cannot teach it to others. Regardless, even if you are a lineage holder, you are in a beautiful 500-year-old temple teaching with, immensely valuable Buddha statues, 2-meter high Buddha statues behind you, in brocades and fancy robes. All this paraphernalia, all this cultural, what is culturally precious, won't help you. And it has amazed me for many years how it is possible that people don't ask the right questions. Why people are not studying the Buddha Dharma properly, what Buddha Shakyamuni encouraged to do, and to really analyze and contemplate our situation. So this is one of the reasons why I felt it necessary to begin this project, Revitalized Zen. But it needs to be said, something that I've said before, that, I think that Revitalized Zen is for people like myself who are or have become disillusioned about the status quo of established Zen. You have to be disillusioned about it. All the so-called preciousness and time-testedness and authenticity of established Zen to understand the points that I say. Because if you have a strong belief, just like I did, I had the strongest belief in Zen, strongest trust. I remember I was still practicing Zen when I met my who became my first wife. And she was a follower of the hugging saint Amma, had been for many years. So we are talking about, she would chant mantras and sing these devotional songs like bhakti yoga songs. And I absolutely laughed about that stuff. I was the most arrogant bastard there was. I was so convinced that Zen is the one and only path there is. There are no other paths. Like all these Indian hugging saints. Pfft, what a joke. That was my attitude. I was so convinced about Zen. And that's why the disillusionment was so hard, so difficult. For months I was so lost because of this. But it turned out that it was one of the greatest blessings I've had. This disillusionment. Shedding this religious view, religious beliefs. Shedding religious faith. This is what all Dharma practitioners really need. This is what Buddha Shakyamuni said exactly. Can't remember which sutta it is. I never remember which sutta. But this is what Buddha Shakyamuni said, that you can't just believe what I say, what I teach. You can't just take my word for granted because I sit on this throne. You can't take anybody for granted who sits on a throne, who has a lineage, who has lineage papers, who has a 500-year temple where she or he teaches. If you want Buddha Dharma, you can't base your trust on any of these things. any of these external factors. You have to build your faith on what and trust on what. Whether the practices, the method gives you, helps you, has that same awakening experiences that Buddha Shakyamuni on his 8th morning saw and had. This is how it is. And this is how it always was, how it always will be. Let's take a 5-minute break at this point, and then we continue. 5 minutes. Let's continue 20 past. 20 past.